Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and today we've got another fantastic show lined up for you. We're going to take a look at some players who could exceed their value, and that's a very important thing. In fact, that might be the most important thing at this time of year, because we're always looking for guys who can jump a tier, guys who are in late in drafts who might be able to really outperform their ADP, but there might even be some names out there that are being drafted in the first few rounds that might have bigger expectations than we really even understand. And to help us break it all down, our newest member of the Fantasy Pros family, our data scientist. He is the one, the only Sam Hoppen. So I want everybody to welcome Sam to the family on the YouTube channel. Go drop the comments below and welcome Sam. Sam, you've had a couple recordings with us. And unfortunately, not one, but two tech issues. But I always say the third time's the charm, Sam. So you're feeling pretty good, I got to imagine, right? That this is going to work out this time, fingers crossed.
One of these days, everything will work out, and it will work out seamlessly. But we are still here. We're here. We're going to give some people some great content.
And Sam's going to be helping us all year long with our projections here on Fantasy Pros and on the betting pro side of things too. So he's in the laboratory, just like Dr. Dre in the Beat Lab, just kind of making all that stuff happen, making it rain numbers. And speaking of making it rain, one of my favorite guys out there in the fantasy football industry also works on the betting side of things as well nowadays. He's from 4for4 Football. He's John Daigle, and he also works at BetSperts as well. John, so many hats for the bald head of yours. It's nice to have another baldy here on the program. Sometimes I get lonely when Derek's not around, but I also noticed that, you know, on Twitter recently, Derek Brown and you have had a little thing where he is the least attractive version of John Daigle. Is this correct? Is it like a Spider-Man thing?
I don't know where that came from, honestly. At some point at the expo, a lot of people apparently started comparing him to me and getting us confused. And to be fair, I was confused for him as well. He's a little more like burly, like he's more of a power lifter than I am. I'm just a wimpy little runner like Sam. And so like he has more muscle than me. So I don't know how you confuse us except for the bald and the beard. That's literally it. So you're just stereotyping us, really.
There you go. So we're going to break down these players here. I'm glad we got that out of the way because that was really bothering me. I was wondering what the hell happened at the expo. I wasn't there and I need to know what's going on there. So we're going to break down these guys for you, and both the guys have excellent lists. We're going to go through 12 players, 6 on John's side, 6 on Sam. John, since you're the guest, let's start with you. Give me a player here for you that you think has the ability to really be a value in 2023.
And I'll go in order of how I see them being values from my, not worst value, but lowest value to the player I think is the best value at their ADP. And this begins with Marvin Mims as my first selection. The seas have actually parted over the past couple of weeks by accidental reasons, given Tim Patrick's unfortunate Achilles injury in back-to-back years, also the recent Jerry Jeudy injury. So now Mims, we think, will start at the very least in 3 wide sets, maybe even 2 wide sets as early as week 1, and a soft matchup against the Raiders defense. So we're already off to a great start for him. Otherwise, though, beyond that, he's an amazing prospect, a 90th percentile athlete who already averaged a 24% target share in his final season in Oklahoma. And that's important because although he did break out with a career-high 9 touchdowns as an 18-year-old at Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley, for as much credit as we give him as a play caller, caters players to his scheme, not the other way around. So Marvin Mims for his career was a rotational receiver, although he was much better than that. And then when Lincoln Riley went to USC, he gave Jordan Addison the same treatment, actually taking Addison out of the slot where he won the Blitnikoff Award and putting him more on the boundary there. Whereas Mims then, without Riley, broke out in his final year for over 1,000 yards because he was no longer a rotational player. He was an every down receiver from the boundary. Also, what's important besides his profile is that Mims, 95% of his career touchdowns in college came on targets 20 yards deep. He has that explosiveness over the top to separate, and that's how we win our leagues, the guys who actually break the game of fantasy football from rounds 12 on. And so I consider Mims, honestly, more in the Mike Evans, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston tier than I do where he's going in drafts right now, which is like 4 rounds higher. So I genuinely think he's just one of the best values on the entire board at his ADP.
Sam, let's get to the first player on your board. Who do you have there that could be a great value this season?
Yeah, John just talked about players that could break fantasy football. And for me, one guy that could do that is Anthony Richardson. We know now that he'll be starting for the Colts from the jump, which for a while was a concern that drafters had, whether he'd be starting right away. He's currently going as the quarterback 15 by ADP on Fantasy Pros, and his rushing ability provides him with such a high floor. I mean, his athleticism that he demonstrated at the combine, the single-handed most athletic quarterback in history based on some of those numbers, just shows how explosive he can be. Over the preseason, he showed just how well he could evade the pocket, evade rushers, and I'm guessing he'll be taking off rushing more. Now, he didn't play extremely well from a passing perspective in the preseason, had a completion rate below 50%, but this is the thing with quarterbacks and rushing. They don't need to be a good real-life quarterback to provide that value. And I think if he is able to figure that passing out, we saw it at Florida that he was able to just really excel in the deep passing game. And he's got Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, and Josh Downs, who he's building a rapport with as well, can catch those long passes. He will certainly pay off that QB 15 ADP.
All right. Yeah. QB 15, 105 overall. Go ahead, John.
Those rushing numbers Sam speaks to his last 2 years in Florida, 8 carries and 55 rushing yards per game. Those are stats that typically translate from collegiate level to the NFL level, something we always watch for. Not only that, but everyone is worried about the same completion rate that Sam talked about. His miserable because he's just so raw. 455 career dropbacks. He's a lot to get under his belt. He's only going to be 21 though when he's starting in week 1. But everyone's worried about the completion rate, that miserable interception against the Bills where it was bad footwork and then forcing the throw over his receiver. But honestly, think about this. The way I've been phrasing it is that the Bears last year averaged the fewest pass attempts per game, 22.2, since the 1979 Chiefs. And Justin Fields was still the QB6 in points per game because of rushing alone. Anthony Richardson can be a terrible quarterback, can be a terrible passer with terrible footwork, and it doesn't matter because the rushing yards are going to get him there at the very least as a low-end QB1. And think about the guys like everyone's drafting players over. I think Geno Smith is like one of the best values at quarterback, but it doesn't matter because Geno Smith doesn't offer a rushing floor. Everyone's trying to put Anthony Richardson behind Tua, Dak, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. It doesn't work like that. Even Justin Herbert last year, for as good as Justin Herbert is, was the QB 17 in points per game because you have to provide a rushing floor to actually get there every week. Otherwise, you just have to be an immense ceiling passer that it goes right for every single game. And that just doesn't happen in the NFL. So Richardson is just so safe too, given the players he's being drafted around.
Yeah, I guess the only fear people have is, does it go so poorly and they lose so many games out of the gate? He ends up not playing for a little while and they give him a breath. I think that's where the danger goes. I'm all about the danger zone with him. You could draft Geno Smith and draft Anthony Richardson in a single quarterback league all day long. I'm all for that. But then, in those super flex leagues, that's where if Richardson does not hit or gets pulled back. I think that's the fear in the marketplace. Now, the first guy that you talked about, Marvin Mims, he was wide receiver 64, 182 overall. The next guy on your list, Daigle, is somebody that is much higher up on the trough. So let's talk about Christian Watson, wide receiver 24, right now on FantasyPros.com in the half PPR rankings on the ADP side. Again, that's a consensus ADP. If you want to get a look at that, that's always over on Fantasy Pros, where it takes all the sites together and gives you an idea of what that ADP looks like. What are your expectations for Watson? Because I know this is another entity, John, that people are uneasy about because of the quarterback change, but you seem optimistic.
Big picture down in drafts this year, I really think the skeleton key is avoiding the tier of running backs who have high floors but zero ceilings. And that stretch of players goes from Najee Harris all the way down to Cam Akers, basically the RB13, and then tack on Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce. The list goes on, Travis Etienne, all the way down to around the RB 24 or 25. And what's happening is people are trying to draft those players to fill their starting spots, to get touches. But the touches don't matter when there are players who break the game of fantasy football. And Christian Watson showed he is that player. I came into the season expecting to fade him because I thought he was going to be being drafted around Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, where he should be, around the second, third round turn. But that's not the case at all. He's instead going around these running backs we should be avidly trying to avoid, like the J.K. Dobbins as well. Why would you draft the floor touch-based option when you get a guy like Christian Watson from his breakout on Week 10 Sunday night against the Cowboys, prime time, 3 touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers, from week 10 on, he played 8 games, and in the 4 games he scored a touchdown, he averaged 22.7 fantasy points. That would have been more than Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. And so, like, when you have a player like that who offers huge hits and little misses, like, that is so much better than the other guys that are being the running backs that are being drafted around him who offer no hits and big misses. So to me, it's such an easy top-down player to add around that range of running backs.
He certainly flashed some big playmaking ability last year in his rookie season, that's for sure. Sam, let's go to somebody on your list next, because this is the only tight end on either of your lists, and it's Pat Freiermuth. Now, currently, Freiermuth is being selected here as tight end 9, the 91st player off the board. And look, we talked about all the different strategies when it comes to tight end. Are you going to go early for Kelsey? You want to go for that next grouping there? You want to find that soft middle, or do you want to wait? And Freiermuth is one of the late pivot guys. So why is he a late pivot for you that might have a lot of value in 23?
Yeah, you could go a lot of different ways at tight end at this point in the draft. I think Darren Waller is a hot pick right now. Evan Ingram, obviously, with the impending Trevor Lawrence breakout. But Pat Freiermuth just stands out to me. This is from our buddy Connor Allen. In 9 games that Freiermuth and Kenny Pickett played together, in which Freiermuth played over 50% of the snaps, he averaged 7.4 targets, 5.2 receptions, and 61 receiving yards per game. That is going to vault him into the top 5 or 6 tight ends. Now, the touchdowns need to the touchdowns need to vault him into the elite tier if he's going to reach that. But he ran a route on 87% of Kenny Pickett's preseason dropbacks, indicating he should be on the field quite a bit. I do think there is obviously some target competition with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, but in 8 of the 9 games that I mentioned that he played over 50% of snaps, he out-targeted George Pickens. So I think Freiermuth is just sort of the lone guy in this Steelers offense who, again, it's the preseason, but they played well. And, there's the hype around George Pickens. There's everyone screaming for Deontay Johnson regression. And Freiermuth, I just think, has a very stable and solid role and has the ceiling to vault into the top 5 or 4 tight ends.
Yeah, look, Freiermuth, I think last year, expectations were obviously, everything in Pittsburgh got kind of supplanted a little bit. Got pushed down a little bit. We're just kind of looking at it and saying, maybe we just have to wait and kind of have this growing pain season with Kenny Pickett. And hopefully now you come out the better for it this season. Kenny Pickett was thrown to the Wolves at a terrible schedule there where he had to face the Bills and all these other really tough defenses in a row. But you know what? Sometimes, you got to just rip the Band-Aid off and you got to see how things go. And hopefully, you saw enough there in December where you're optimistic that Kenny Pickett can take the next step forward, because if he does, that helps Deontay Johnson get back on track. It helps Pickens take the next step, and Freiermuth too, another one of those guys. Before we get to the next guy here on the list here for John, for the values in 2023 left in that draft, don't forget, everybody, the best value too is a ticket where you can go and get it for a better price and get it without the fees and all the nonsense. And Game Time is that. The best place to get tickets for any of the games coming up here is the Game Time app, and it's the official ticketing partner of FantasyPros Fantasy Football. So for last-minute amazing deals on tickets to see your favorite football team this September or all year long, download the Game Time app right now. And as you've heard us say before, over and over again, it's not just for tickets to NFL. We're talking about baseball games. We're talking about concerts. We're talking about comedy shows, everything. They've got it all on Game Time. So download the Game Time app and redeem the code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms apply. And again, it's very simple. Download the Game Time app, enter the promo code FANTASYPROS, one word, very easy to remember, and you get $20 off your first order, no matter where you live. Get out there, have some fun. Go see a game, especially, before football starts and the kids are back at school. You have less time. Maybe kids are even back at school. But I'm serious. Look, this is your last chance to get in here and start to use that Game Time app. So download it today. Use that promo code FANTASYPROS. Get the lowest price guaranteed. And tell them Joey P sent you. All right, let's get to the next name on your list here. And this is a big one. One that is extremely polarizing, John. I've had every single fantasy expert in creation on this show, and I feel like every single one of them has a different opinion on the next guy on your list. So let's talk about Deshaun Watson, QB 10, going 84 overall. It feels like you're buying in at QB 10. That's the right price for you.
Buying it higher, actually. I think he should be in the same tier as Trevor Lawrence, as guys who can break the tiers and potentially move into the top 6 quarterbacks. What happened last year for the Browns, I understand. It was very, very bad, and he was absolutely miserable to watch. And like everyone listening out there, I hope he's still bad at professional football. I hope he gets cut after week 1. We never have to hear from him again. But the fact is, Deshaun Watson splits were vastly different than his career averages. Even looking at yards per attempt, 8.3 for his career with the Texans compared to 6.5 with the Browns, a career low touchdown rate with Cleveland over those 6 starts last year. And that was actually the first time he averaged less than 20 fantasy points per game for his entire career. And he averaged 14.3. Just a stark difference. And so honestly, as someone who comes from the poker world, the DFS world, has been doing this for a while, it's one of those situations where you just suck it up and say, that's not going to happen again. Like, it's just a situation you fade altogether thinking he's a significantly better player than that, given everything we saw prior to those 6 miserable games. So I'm betting on Deshaun Watson. I'm betting on a big bounce back. And more importantly, he's an easy bet to make because he's not just a pocket passer. Last year, whenever he showed back up, he averaged 6 carries per game, the 8th most among all quarterbacks, providing 3.9 fantasy points per game, just his legs every week. So, like, we still have a high floor here. And if the passing comes back around, it's a ceiling player as well, who, again, could then mesh with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert in that top 5 quarterback. So, just an easy bet for me. And he won't be drafted as the QB 7 or 8. He'll be going further in superflex leagues and your home leagues. And he's just a player I still want to bet on. Or I don't want to, but I will.
Well, you want to, you will. And John, look, I look at it this way too. In single quarterback leagues, why not? I mean, what do you have to lose? I mean, the worst case scenario is you go hit the waiver wire and you go pick up another quarterback. Or you draft the boring old Kirk Cousins as a 12th quarterback overall on the way out, just if you really are concerned with the bottom just completely falling out of Deshaun Watson. Well, it's okay. The replacement value is still there. It's when you get into, that 14-team league territory, it gets a little dicey, or when you start to get potentially into the Superflex world, that's another bet where you've got to return the value there. How do you feel about him in Superflex, John? That's my question too. I know in single quarterback leagues, that's an easy sell. So the same confidence in those 2 QB or Superflex formats?
3rd, 4th round. Whenever I usually look for him or Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence always gets drafted much higher.
Yes.
And I think everyone, I could be wrong, but I think everyone's parsing the next tier quarterbacks incorrectly, because honestly, after Lawrence and Watson, all those guys are the same. Like, I love Daniel Jones, don't get me wrong, but the difference between Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, like, they're all the same guys. 6 players who just take your pick. Everyone has them ranked differently, and that tells you they're all the same too, because we can't agree on any of them. So at least Watson does add the rushing floor to break himself apart. Whenever he goes off the board, that's when I usually start waiting for Geno Smith, my personal preference, in the 4th round. But I honestly take Deshaun Watson in Superflex leagues in the 3rd round because, again, he falls there only because of recency bias.
There you go. All right, Sam, I want to talk about the guy on your list who's next year at number 4, because I got a ton of shares of this guy. So talk to everybody about Roschon Johnson, because I want to be excited here with all of the shares that I've got. Why should I be, and why should people go draft him this weekend?
So Roschon Johnson currently going as the RB53. I think if he plays every game this season, there's no way he's not paying off that ADP. Now, obviously, injuries are part of fantasy football, but D'Onta Foreman now seems like he's clearly behind Johnson in the pecking order, and he's probably behind Khalil Herbert. It seems like he's had a really great camp, but Roschon Johnson was one of my favorite prospects coming out this year. He was one of the most efficient backs in college football. Last year, he was just stuck behind Bijan Robinson, which is fair, but he averaged about a half of a missed tackle forced per attempt last year, which was at the top of the college game. He averaged 4.28 yards after contact per attempt, and he was a decent pass catcher as well. He averaged 1.16 yards per route run. So I don't think I need to remind people that the Bears are one of the most run-heavy teams. Now, Fields is going to take some of those opportunities away, but both Montgomery and Herbert were pretty solid last year, and I think Johnson is a better running back than David Montgomery. So again, based on some of the preseason usage, it does look like Johnson is the passing downs back in that offense for what that is worth. But I'm betting on the talent here. He was drafted by the current regime. I do think that Khalil Herbert will have a slightly shorter leash. They never gave him the the full workload last year, despite him being the more efficient back in that backfield. So I'm just really excited about Roschon Johnson. Was going to be excited about him sort of regardless of where he landed, and think that his talent will win out.
I was actually excited that he landed with the Bears for what you said earlier, Sam, which is it's a run heavy attack anyway. So that means two things. Number one, opportunities just because of the volume, or opportunities because of attrition of the guys who get hurt ahead of him. One question for you, because I think this is my strategy with Roschon. If you're going to draft him, you got to be patient. Like you can't go cutting this guy 3-4 weeks into the season. This feels like more of a second half play to me, who could help you down that stretch run. Is that how you see Roschon too?
For sure. It's going to take a week or two to really see how the backfield touches play out, especially if Foreman does stay on the roster. So I'm probably not starting him from the jump unless I'm really desperate, but I am going to be very patient with him and suspect that he'll be able to get some run, no pun intended, sooner rather than later.
Speaking of values, not just Roschon Johnson, but another value too in the beer world is always Miller Lite. You want the best bang for your buck, including just 96 calories and 3.2 carbs in a 12-ounce can. That's what you want here. It's Miller Lite. And I know everyone's heading to the drafts right now. If you don't have time to pick it up, or if you completely forget and you go, oh my goodness, how are we going to have a football draft without some beer? I mean, they seem like they go together to me. I don't know why you would do one without the other, but again, MillerLite.com/FantasyPros, that's the place to go, where you can get Miller Lite delivered right to your doorstep. It's a beautiful thing. Of course, Miller Lite also available wherever you get your beers, and you can go right now and pick up a 6-pack, a 12-pack. In fact, you can get the 24 even. If you've got a big, giant Superflex auction going on there, you're going to be there all day, then by golly, get all the Miller Lite you possibly need. Again, the way to do it, MillerLite.com/FantasyPros, and that's the best way to get it. A lot of people don't realize that the service is available where you can get it delivered, so we're helping you out, and you can pretty much get Miller Lite wherever that beer is sold. Don't forget to drink responsibly and draft responsibly, too. So enjoy the last few weeks of summer here. Enjoy football season, too, because we've got all these games starting up. Everyone's going to want to get together, watch the games. I'm sure you'll have some extra cans laying around, too. So go get your Miller Lite right now. Again, MillerLite.com/FantasyPros. That's the way to do it. All right, let's get to another name on your list. And this one is a big one. But I kind of think I know where you're going with this one, John. So let's talk about the number 3 guy on your list.
I have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp in the same tier. All have the potential to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall, but only one man of that tier is always left behind. I've done enough high-stakes drafts where Cooper Kupp will fall to 108 to 110. I've done enough Superflex where Cooper Kupp's always available at 112, 201, and I've done enough home leagues at 112 where Cooper Kupp will fall out. And he's just always the one who's being forgotten about for recency bias, and I don't get it because everyone's drafting Chase as the 102. That's Kupp. He's my personal wide receiver 2. And they say, oh, you think Cooper Kupp can outscore Jamar Chase? That's the wrong question because Cooper Kupp already outscored Jamar Chase. The question is, can Chase outscore Cooper Kupp? Last year, Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 1 in points per game in the 9 games he played. Factor that in with the 8 starts he made with Matthew Stafford, that number increased to 20.3 points per game, all the way up from 18.2. So again, the wide receiver 1. Also with Matthew Stafford, he led the league in target share, 33.3%. And then the way the offense worked, it was so bad that we're also expecting those rates to increase. Last year's offense for the Rams was Sean McVay's first with a team that averaged less than 62 plays per game. They averaged 58.9. We're expecting that to increase. Last year's offense was also the first one for Sean McVay that averaged below a 60% pass play rate in neutral game script. They averaged 58.5%. And the team's defense right now, after cut down day, 71% of the players on defense are rookies. So we're expecting a ton of passing volume from them as well. It's just, there are so many things that can go right for Cooper Kupp and win you your league as the wide receiver 1, as opposed to going wrong for him. So yes, I still think Cooper Kupp is one of the best values and should be in the first round of every draft.
No, he definitely should be in the first round. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I like
but he gets pushed out sometimes. He gets left behind.
I don't know what drafts you've been in lately, but I want to be in there where he gets pushed out altogether. I mean, all the drafts we do here, we have our experts and we have our listeners join us. Mm-hmm. Cooper Kupp typically goes in the first 5 picks, somewhere around there. Now, he is going in current ADP, to John's point, as the 7th player overall. To me, that's where it's an incredible value, and I totally get where you're coming from. Let me play devil's advocate. Not just the age of Cooper Kupp, but also coming off the injury, having some of those injuries that he's had in the past too, but also Matthew Stafford. You couple in the risk of Stafford too, who, look, let's be honest here. There were talks about him retiring and not coming back at all last year because of some of the health issues that he had. He is back. But is that enough there to knock him out of that tier in that conversation from Jefferson, Chase, and Tyreek Hill?
For me personally, no. I think all of them, Aaron Donald and Sean McVay, all returned, and Stafford, to just give it one more year. So they didn't end everything.
Well, that worked out for Tom
note.
Brady last year. Let me tell you, that was really great.
That's
one
true.
more year
yes.
to the horizon. That did not fail at all. I'm just kidding.
Well, they at least won everyone the fantasy playoff game in Week 17 against the Panthers. We at least had the 200-yard game, and Brady
still were alive, and Mike Evans was on your roster, which I'd love to see the numbers on that, John. You wanted Sam? You're the numbers guy. Go get me the number of the people who that Mike Evans game actually helped out. But I think that's the problem with Cooper Kupp, where people have that now. I'm with you. At 7, I'm in. At 3 or 4. That's where I struggle with Cooper Kupp. You're still in. I love that.
I'm absolutely still in. Now, the thing about that is you don't have to get him at 3 or 4. That's what makes a value. Although I have him there, rankings differentiate from ADP. Rankings exist just to tell you we need to be higher on these guys. So when he falls to 108, 110, and again, I'm seeing it often, lots of times in the high stakes leagues, you take him every time.
I've been in leagues with John over the years, and I know John puts his money where his mouth is. So I guarantee you, whatever he's telling you today, usually it's for better, I would say. Although,
ask my Russell Wilson MVP ticket how that went last year.
Well, that one I could have told you the opposite way. I mean, I could have shaken you off that one. All right, Sam, let's get to another player on your list here. Who is number 3 for you in terms of players that could really exceed value?
I got another rookie here, Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. He was the 5th wide receiver taken off the board, the first one in the second round after those 4 came off in the first round, and 39th overall. He played every snap with Bryce Young in the final preseason game. He ran a route on 29 of Young's 31 dropbacks this preseason, and he's competing with, Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall, and Laviska Shenault. I mean, it seems like there's just too easy of a path to him potentially leading the team in targets, to be honest. And in his final season in college, he was a real deep play threat. He had an average depth of target over 14 yards. He averaged over 7 yards after catch per reception. So he was really, really good in his final season. I'm drafting him in as many places as I can, because I just think the ambiguous situation with how that wide receiver room could shake out makes it so that his value is incredibly high and has a very high ceiling as well. Again, could be another guy similar to Johnson that we just talked about that you have to be a little bit patient with to see, again, where he truly does land in the pecking order for the Panthers wide receivers. But again, I think it will be a situation sooner rather than later where his talent will show out and he will be able to make a difference and be able to be plugged into fantasy lineups.
What about, again, I'm not advocating this fellow, but what about the Adam Thielen recency bias too? Because you see that rapport starting to build between the two of them, and that's what people are talking about. Do you think that is a temporary thing, and then Mingo becomes more of the guy as the season goes on? That's clearly what you're talking about, right? Because Thielen became a guy that nobody wants to draft, nobody wants to have, but at least in the early going in preseason, it looks like that's the favorite Bryce Young target.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a better chance of Mingo eclipsing Chark on the depth chart, just the sort of stylistically and how they play. I do think, again, Thielen's had an excellent track record over the last several years. I think offers that veteran presence, and it could be, again, 3 or 4 weeks from now, we just see Thielen and Mingo in on 2 wide receiver sets. So there obviously is some concern that Thielen or Chark or any of these guys that I mentioned could be the leading player in targets for the Panthers, but I'm hitching my wagon to the young gun who flashed a lot this preseason as well.
And remember, everybody, all the names here that John's talking about, that Sam's talking about, put them in your cheat sheets above some of the other players there. use that cheat sheet feature in Draft Wizard this weekend, and you can, again, create your own. You can use a hybrid of different experts along with your own, sync your leagues up using Draft Wizard, download the app, and that way you can get the most out of all this knowledge that we're dropping here for you on the podcast. And the winner of our autographed Josh Jacobs jersey, courtesy of bettingpros.com, is Eric Rivera. Congratulations, Eric. Get in touch with us, and our customer support agents will help you out at mailbag@fantasypros.com. Again, hit us up, mailbag@fantasypros.com, with your mailing address, proof of your subscription to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, and we'll get that jersey shipped out to you right away. Again, congratulations to Eric Rivera. You're the big winner. Way to go, buddy. All right, we got 2 guys for each of you left on your lists. And this player is somebody that I loved coming into the league. John, everybody knows this here. I drafted him everywhere 2 years ago, and everywhere I had to drop him because I just needed more help with all the injuries and bye weeks. And it was the biggest regret that I've had in fantasy football in a long time. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been pretty good at football. Right now, he's going as wide receiver 9. So not too much value off this board, the 18th player over the wall, but you think that it could get even better for Amon-Ra this year.
Yeah, you missed out on his 32.9% target share in that last 6 days. Not to rub it in.
I missed it. Hurt. Thanks, John. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And
maybe you're in, though. Maybe you were in whenever you had the 31.5% target share alongside T.J. Hawkinson. Maybe you were in after the trade deadline when they moved Hawkinson. He averaged a 28.7% target share. Either way, the fact is Amon-Ra St. Brown's inevitable, and he doesn't go away. And the way I view it, with this meat on the bone, the higher ceiling, even more so than what we've seen the last year and 6 games, is that last season everyone looks to Jamal Williams and the way the team operated their offense inside the 5-yard line and says that's going to repeat itself. That's going to happen again. But the only reason Jamal Williams not only led the league in rushing touchdowns, but recorded the most touchdowns from the 1-yard line since 2015 of any player was because Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't have shorter shoelaces. He got tackled inside the 5-yard line 7 times. I don't know how to quantify that for anyone else, but I would just say it doesn't happen again.
That's a great stat, John. That's a great stat.
How many times can you get ankle tackled in prime opportunity?
7.
Even underdog. Yeah, that's it. Our friends at Underdog even released his touchdown prop at 4.5, and I just thought the dude has double-digit touchdowns in his outlook. Like, why are we perceiving or projecting anything less than that? So, yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown has so much more to climb. Also, remember, whenever they traded Hawkinson, he got 7 consecutive games with at least 1 carry in a row. They just started saying, how do we get you the ball more in intricate ways? And so this year, I think, is when the ceiling truly pops and we see a sky.
I love it. Look, I was able to buy back in last year everywhere, but it was that rookie season that I was just ahead of the game. He was my last pick everywhere, John. I had him everywhere. And I just, at certain points, like, look, it's not happening. Maybe I just need to let it go. And
it's the Roschon thing we talked about, right?
Yeah, sometimes certain
or Christian Watson last year. How long can you stash a player?
Well, how long can you stash a player? Because it's all about trying to stay competitive to make the playoffs. And that's the thing. Like, sometimes you have other injuries, you have bye weeks, there's certain things crush you, and you get in these bad situations. But it's something that I learned a little bit better even last year. None of us can stop learning. We should all continue to learn and get better at this. That's why we're doing this. But the whole point is when you're drafting some of these younger players, I don't care if it's Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, like the list goes on, Zay Flowers, like all the young guys, like just be patient with that investment. Now, I know it's easier to be patient with a guy, like that. Sometimes it's easy to cut bait with a player that you took with your last pick, like I did with Amon-Ra everywhere, because you go, it was my last pick anyway. I think that's where it plays on your mind a little bit, where you had, like, it didn't cost me anything. It didn't work out. Let me move on. But man, I wish I hadn't. That's it.
That's why I always promote more flex options and shorter benches, because I want to force patience. I want everyone to have to make cutthroat decisions every single week. That's the best way to play fantasy football.
I love it.
Are you willing to hold on to Christian Watson and Amon-Ra?
Yes, prisoners.
That's the way to play.
There you go. John Daigle, everybody. All right, let's get to the next guy on your list, Sam. Number 2, back to the running backs for you. Who is it?
It's Samaje Perine. I'd like to invite all of you to the Perine party, where we fade players who tore their ACL in their knee and target their backups, because Sean Payton has shown a tendency not to feature just one running back. And I don't think, despite the hype train coming forward with Javonte Williams and his perceived better health right now, I don't think that he's going to give Williams the entire workload that I think people are expecting. So last year, Perine earned a career high 55 targets. The wide receivers, like John mentioned earlier in the show, are falling like flies. They're going to need someone to throw the ball to, and I think Perine will step into that role. I think he's got 10 to 12 touches per game potentially carved out for him this year. I'm really excited. I mean, they brought him in free agency, gave him a really solid deal, and I don't see Sean Payton leaning that much on Javonte Williams, and the biggest beneficiary of that is going to be Samaje Perine. Last year, Russell Wilson targeted running backs at a 23% clip, which was the highest rate of his career. So I think he's shifting a little bit to the way he plays football. And again, at RB 39, current ADP right now, it's easy for me to see a scenario where he pays that off and is a consistent flex contributor to a lot of rosters.
All right, let's get to the number one guy on the list here for 12 players who could exceed their value. And, don't adjust your screens here if you're watching on YouTube. Yes, this man is bald. Yes, he has a beard. Yes, he has a big personality. And yes, he is picking the same guy who I could basically describe as Derek Brown to you. But just like Derek Brown, John's got the same guy on his list at the top of this board. John, talk to the people about Tony Pollard.
Probably will just say the same thing Debro has been yelling this entire offseason. But when we talk about players exceeding value, it of course means players who can exceed their projections. And drafts are fun right now because Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs in home leagues are working as blockers and not allowing Tony Pollard to be drafted in the first round as he should be. Thus, that's why Tony Pollard is literally the best value in all of fantasy football to this very day. Wow. Last year, we already saw the RB9 in points per game on only 13.7 touches per week. Now we have no Ezekiel Elliott. And so we're envisioning more touches for Pollard, who's ranked top 5 every single season in the league in yards after contact per attempt. And then we also have 3 career starts without Elliott for Pollard, and he exceeded 21 PPR points in all 3 of those starts with finishes as the RB1, RB7, and RB3 in those 3 games. He's just a perfect player that we are projecting for more touches to keep on doing what he's already been doing and what he's already proven he can be as a ceiling player and top 3, top 2. If I'm playing Debro, top 1 overall running back. So honestly, Pollard should be a first, second round turn player. He won't be in your league, and he's the best value on the board. All
right, let me ask you this question then. He's going as the RB6. He's the 15th player off the board. Yep. Because you think he's the best value, do you also think that you should be, leapfrogging guys like Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler for Tony Pollard?
I stop at Eckler, but Bijan and Barkley, absolutely.
Okay.
Barkley, there's so many red flags with Barkley. It really seems like we're chasing his second round ADP that we got wrong from last year. Some of us got wrong from last year, and in trying to jam him in the first round, like it's really odd the way he's being treated.
I love how you dropped in that some of us. I don't know who those people were, but some of us, some people,
yeah.
Some people. All right, Sam, close us out here. Do it strong here. Give me your number one guy here that could really exceed value this fantasy season.
So on this show, I've spewed out a lot of stats. You mentioned I'm a data scientist, so I like to make a lot of my decisions based off of the data. This is purely a vibes-based pick right here because none of the advanced data with respect to Elijah Moore shows us that he's really going to pop this year. The Cleveland Browns traded for him this offseason, and I really just think the new situation is going to help. If John is right about how well Deshaun Watson's going to play this year, then a rising tide is going to lift all boats, and that boat includes Elijah Moore. So I do think the way that the Browns have been using Elijah Moore this preseason, lining him up out of the backfield, looking for ways to manufacture touches for him, shouldn't, I think, really be a shock, given they don't really have a pass catching back to replace Kareem Hunt. They traded for Pierre Strong and they have Jerome Ford, but I do think it is indicative of how they're going to use him this season. In the preseason, he led the team in targets per route run and target share. He did have a lot of routes underneath with a 3.8 yard average depth of target. So I do think at the wide receiver 48, again, you're not investing that much into a guy who could be playing on 2 wide receiver sets with a guy who, again, has shown an ability to be an elite quarterback. And if you're hitching your wagon to Deshaun Watson, then I think Elijah Moore is a great way to, again, continue to invest in that offense.
I mean, the value is absurd to me. Wide receiver 50, sign me up, please. I've been drafting him. Sam, look, he's the 120th player off the board. I've been drafting this guy since June in best ball leagues. I've been drafted him all over the place. And I kept thinking at some point, like, it's going to go away. Like, I'm not going to get the value. And it's gone up a little bit, but still, wide receiver 50, I just don't get it. John, I want to ask you, because you had talked about Deshaun Watson. So is Elijah Moore that piece that we connected to Deshaun Watson, in your opinion, that is the perfect storm where you don't have to pay up the ADP necessarily for Amari Cooper? Instead, you get Deshaun late, you get Elijah Moore late, and all of a sudden you've got an incredible value combination.
In terms of ADP value, I think it's Elijah Moore and David Njoku. David Njoku, if only because the profile, age, and target share and competition, really none. Also, in those last 6 games, for as bad as Watson was, only David Njoku and George Kittle, of course, who won every one of their fantasy leagues because he led the league in touchdowns in his last 5 games. Those were the only 2 tight ends who saw 40% of their team's red zone targets. And so the results weren't there for Njoku from Watson, but he got targets where it mattered most in that 6-game stretch. So he's always that someone I veer away from, with Freiermuth in that same tier before I just say the rest of these guys, tight end 10 on, they're all the same player. I don't care. I'll wait till the last round. For Elijah Moore, what I keep coming back to is in those 6 games, whenever they transition from Jacoby Brissett to Watson, the Browns' 11 personnel rate increased from 16th median to top 10 overall with Watson, 76% pass play rate. So we think they're going to be a lot more 3 wide sets. We think they're going to be passing more and spread out more, which is good for everyone. Even Nick Chubb, first-round player. Nick Chubb averaged 7 yards per carry from 11 personnel last year. He's going to destroy.
Yes.
So I genuinely just think it's an offense to be on top of across the board.
Love it. Can't get enough of it. Gentlemen, great stuff, everybody. Like, just tremendous work here. Sam Hoppen, everybody, make sure you, again, go follow him on Twitter. Make sure you also check out all of his work here at FantasyPros.com. Sam, we're very excited to have you as part of the team going into this season, too. You're providing some fantastic analytics for us on both sides of the fantasy world and the betting world. And John Daigle, one of my favorite people. John, I'm sorry you weren't there in person for me to hoist the belt in our Superflex Flex League. I'm sorry you missed that. I'll send you pictures after the show. That way you can see them all.
I got one of my own. Don't worry. We're all good.
You got one of your? Okay.
I've taken the championship a couple times. We're good.
I love that you had it so ready just in case I brought it up. I love it.
Well, I need background pieces, Joe. I have to have a background for my
I got
career.
this whole shelf going up here. But seriously, everybody, go follow him on the Twitter machine at NotJDaigle, Daigle. Check out his amazing work at 4for4 Football and, of course, at BetSperts. And don't forget to... fantasy season's here, football season's here. It's Miller time, baby. MillerLite.com/fantasypros. Go get it delivered while you still have some summer left, or just for the big games, your tailgates, anything you got going on, all your fantasy drafts. Again, just 96 calories. Sounds good to me. A little MillerLite.com/fantasypros action for you. And of course, if you want to get out there to events, to games, to comedy shows, concerts. I mean, I'm sure Sam's going to Burning Man. I think he just got back from there. You could tell. That's why he's so calm today. Just let all of the freak flag fly out there last few days. But seriously, everybody, go download the Game Time app. That's what you want to do. Download the app. Enter the promo code FantasyPros. Get $20 off your first order of tickets and get out there and see some fun stuff. Again, the Game Time app is the best place to get the tickets for all of your events. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For John and Sam, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.